Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, December 9th, 2022. Senator Whitehouse of Rhode Island demonstrates why the IRS must go. The difference between God and a U.S. Senator is that God doesn't think he's a U.S. Senator. The arrogance of many in D.C. who believe that they, and only they, are smart enough to determine what's best for us is well known. Likewise, the idea that they'll try to use the IRS to reward their friends and punish their enemies isn't exactly news to anyone either. An article published by the Daily Signal provides yet another reason why the ruling class fights so hard to keep the IRS in the income payroll tax system and why the IRS must go. The correspondence also clearly exposes the real reason why so many in D.C. supported hiring 87,000 new IRS agents. Whether it's making life miserable for their political opponents or trying to punish anyone who would dare object to being told what's good for them, they see those new agents as 87,000 more foot soldiers who will obediently do their bidding. Here are some of the points covered in that article. A total of 176 pages of correspondence from and to Senator Whitehouse was obtained from the IRS by the conservative watchdog group American Accountability Foundation through the Freedom of Information Act. That correspondence was then shared with the Daily Signal. The letters span a time frame from January 19, 2021, the day before President Biden took office, and continuing into May of 2022. Tom Jones, president and founder of the American Accountability Foundation, said, quoting, "It's abundantly clear that Whitehouse is trying to take the 87,000 new IRS agents and put them to work investigating me and my friends because he doesn't like our politics." Jones continued, "The Lois Lerner stuff was a mid-level bureaucrat abusing her power to investigate conservative groups. This is a U.S. Senator basically trying to turn the heat up on investigations by the Internal Revenue Service." In one letter to IRS Commissioner Charles Rettig, Whitehouse urged the revocation of Turning Point USA's tax-exempt status, and one of the reasons was that Turning Point did not require masks at one of their meetings. Quoting from the letter, "Tax-exempt status provides a substantial benefit to charitable organizations and reflects the federal government's endorsement of an organization's activities. Organizations that knowingly put in danger minors entrusted to their care should not enjoy the benefits of tax-exempt status. Accordingly, I urge the IRS to review whether it should revoke Turning Point USA's tax-exempt status." End of quote. Jones said, "What's important about these letters is that it makes very clear that a U.S. Senator is attempting to essentially encourage the IRS to investigate his political opponents. Now, he never mentions that there's a vast group of left-wing nonprofits out there whose funding I envy. You don't hear a peep from Sheldon Whitehouse about the New Venture Fund, Arabella Advisors, 1630, or a laundry list of other folks on the left." The simple truth is that Whitehouse and other Democrat senators are asking that politically active tax-exempt groups with whom they disagree or who dare to question them be denied their tax-exempt status. Fortunately, outgoing IRS Commissioner Charles Rettig has refused to provide the senator with the data he requested or to take the actions he requested. Rettig said, "Section 6103 of the Internal Revenue Code protects the privacy of tax returns and tax return information of all taxpayers. Therefore, we cannot disclose any actions we may or may not take on this information." Rettig went on to say, "We determined that it was not necessary to the efficient administration of the Internal Revenue laws for such tax-exempt organizations, those not described in Section 501c3 or 527 of the Code, to report annually the names and addresses of their substantial contributors. However, all tax-exempt organizations must continue to report the amount of contributions from each substantial contributor, maintain the names and addresses of their substantial contributors in their own books and records, and provide such information upon request." Rettig's response letter goes on to say that unauthorized sharing of tax information could be illegal. Congress has not authorized the IRS to enforce campaign finance laws. In addition, Section 6103 of the Code strictly limits the IRS's ability to share tax information with other federal agencies. Accordingly, the IRS cannot disclose any names or addresses of substantial contributors to other federal agencies for non-tax investigations, including campaign finance matters, except in very narrowly prescribed circumstances. Unauthorized disclosures may lead to civil and criminal liability. In conclusion, no one will dispute that the federal government must be funded. Now, there can be honest disagreement on how much funding it needs or how that money should be spent, but no one denies the need to fund the government. Now, if the income payroll tax system was the only way to fund the government, then it follows that everyone would have to accept the need for an agency like the IRS to administer and enforce the tax laws. But the income payroll tax system is not the only way to fund the government. There's a much fairer, much simpler, and much more efficient way to do it: the FAIRtax. The FAIRtax collects the needed revenue to fund the federal government, but it does it in a way that has the least adverse impact on our individual freedom and the least impact on our economic prosperity. There are no tax returns to file, no records to keep. We pay our federal taxes when we make retail purchases of new goods and services. Now, the elites in D.C. know this, but they stubbornly refuse to replace the income tax with the FAIRtax because they know that when the FAIRtax is enacted, they can no longer reward their friends and punish their enemies by giving one group a tax break and another group a tax penalty. They can no longer fill their campaign coffers with money extorted from lobbyists and special interests looking to buy tax favors, and there will be no more IRS that they can use against their political opponents. No one can really argue with the statement made in 1887 by Lord Acton. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Now, will the FAIRtax eliminate all of the arrogance and corruption of the ruling class and their minions in D.C.? Well, no, but it will deprive them of one of their most powerful weapons that they use in their never-ending quest for money, power, and control. The FAIRtax will allow us to take back control. The income payroll tax system is broken. It's no longer working. We can't repair it, but we can replace it with the FAIRtax. Join us and take back control of our country and our lives, not with bullets, but with the elimination of one of the biggest threats to our liberty and economic prosperity, the income payroll tax. We should all remember Edmund Burke's warning that applies to our efforts to take back control. Nobody made a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he could only do a little. We should also remember this quote from George Orwell's 1984, which, if we do nothing, may foretell your and your children's future. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. So what can each of us do? We can write letters and make calls to our elected representatives and attend Zoom town hall meetings demanding that if they really want to allow Americans to take back control, the first step is to eliminate the income payroll tax system and enact the FAIRtax. Take back control. Help us pass the FAIRtax. The IRS will be gone and we'll pay our taxes when we make purchases. We, not the ruling class and their minions in D.C., will decide how much federal tax we pay, and we'll know how much tax we're paying because taxes will no longer be hidden from us. It will be clearly shown on every retail receipt. If you have friends who don't know about the FAIRtax, send them to fairtax.org. Have them watch the whiteboards under how it works, and if they agree, ask them to please join us. Then, contact your members of Congress and the President and demand that Congress pass the FAIRtax, the only truly fair tax.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at fairtax.org.